Pterois volitans, or lionfish, is a scorpion fish indigenous to the Pacific and Indian Oceans that traveled to the Atlantic coast of the United States at the end of the 20th century. In its native habitat, the lionfish is just a predator amongst many, but here in the Atlantic, it has become the terror of the sea. How did the lionfish eliminate all other species so quickly and so completely? Dr. Justin Grubich studies the kinematics of underwater predators. He works on the physical structure of fish and their movements. These factors can then determine their efficiency as predators. Understanding how the lionfish captures its prey will give us insight into the predatory mechanism. The speed at which the predator swallows its prey isn't visible to the naked eye, nor to an everyday video camera filming at 25 frames per second. Justin Grubich's research requires special equipment that can only be used in a laboratory setting. This lionfish was captured 2 weeks ago. It was immediately placed in an aquarium where it adjusted to captivity, bathed in a calming red light. Justin Grubich has been feeding it with tweezers. This lengthy protocol is coming to an end, and the scientists can now film the predatory act with a high-speed camera. Justin gives it a shrimp, and the camera records it all at a speed of 2,000 frames per second.
Here we have a fantastic strike of a lionfish. Lionfish are unique among fish predators in that they have incredibly protrusible jaws. They use suction to generate a suction pulse of water that draws the prey into the mouth. The human eye sees at about 30 hertz. That means at about 0.33 milliseconds. And you can see here by this time stamp that this behavior of striking at the prey is occurring in 1/3 of the time that the human eye can perceive. And you'll see here that the jaw actually protrudes over 40%, almost 40% of its head length. And when it reaches its maximum jaw protrusion, it expands its head from the side. And what basically, like sucking through a straw, it sucks in the prey.
Experience tells us that the lionfish achieves complete jaw protrusion in 10 milliseconds and sucks in the shrimp in 14 milliseconds. The predatory act lasts a total of 24 milliseconds.
When we think about kinematics of how the jaws in fishes work, you got to keep in mind that the skeleton of a fish, or the skull of a fish rather, the skull of a fish is actually made up of over 20 different bones. So here we have a skeleton made by a colleague of mine, Steve Husky. And you can see how intricately aligned all the different bones are in the head of a lionfish.
A digital 3D image reveals the complex movements of the 20 skull bones working together to make the predator's jaw protrude.
Now, when we compare this lionfish to other predators that have been examined using this kind of kinematic analysis, we see that it falls out about 3rd place among all fishes in terms of the amount of jaw protrusion it can generate. The all-time champion, of course, is Epibulus insidiator, known as the sling jaw wrasse, which is also common in the Red Sea. Here we have a cichlid known as Petinia splendida. It's a South American species that is found in the freshwater Amazon region. And then we have the lionfish. Among marine fishes, it's very, very effective in terms of how it can feed on its prey.
The lionfish's prey doesn't stand a chance, and the lionfish feeds all the time. Understanding the amount of food he consumes each day will help evaluate the scope of his predatory power.
And making it thin So like you can make a sheet of water.
James Morris has calculated the daily amount of food the lionfish needs.
Release the gas that's bound, that's supersaturated.
One of the fish captured in the Neko has been put in a respirometer, a chamber containing circulating reservoir water.
Pump through the chamber and into
By measuring the oxygen dissolved in the fresh water as it enters and exits the chamber, it's possible to calculate how much oxygen the lionfish has used up.
Fish is respiring and it's removing oxygen.
From there, a biological model of the species can be created once the food consumption factor is subtracted.
Oxygen levels of the water coming into the chamber and the oxygen levels of the water exiting the chamber. So we've learned that lionfish can consume as high as 6% of their body weight per day over time at some of the higher temperatures. And when calculating that feeding rate, we've learned that it can have quite an impact on the fish community. In some cases, lionfish can remove a considerable biomass of small forage fishes and can even deplete that biomass, causing change to the reef fish community, including biodiversity and forage base that we know is really important for commercially important species like snapper and grouper.
This fish is especially voracious. This huge appetite transposed onto a 165-pound man would represent over 10 pounds of food per day. How far will the lionfish extend its empire? It seems insatiable.
Lionfish do not survive when the mean winter bottom water temperatures go below 15 degrees Celsius. So this 15-degree mark appears to be a threshold where above that lionfish survive and thrive, but below that, you just don't even really find them at all. But their likely distribution is probably going to extend all the way from Cape Hatteras, North Carolina in the north, all the way south to the northern coast of Argentina. Or we're not thinking that it's likely that lionfish will disperse through the Panama Canal, probably for a couple of reasons. The water's kind of cold in the Pacific, so there's a big temperature difference between the Pacific and the Atlantic, as well as there being freshwater lakes that could also be a barrier to dispersal. However, we really don't know for sure whether they can disperse through the Panama Canal.
No one knows if the lionfish will be able to cross the barrier of the Panama Canal. But if it does, this merciless predator, moving unhindered at the speed of the underwater currents, will pursue its conquest of the West.